And tonight's panelists include a long list of people who hold very high profiles in the community, including the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security. What's your opinion on these people coming all the way out here to the university to discuss this?
Well, I think it puts an exclamation point on the significance of what the topics that we're talking about tonight, as well as the type of projects and problems that we're addressing together. They're here to wrestle with us, to address these challenges in many ways, but to also just share ideas and insights and information that they have that can help us progress and tackle the issues of the day down at the port, as well as the issues of Long Beach. I mean, the issues of the port are the issues for Long Beach, and the issues of Long Beach are the issues for this university. And we're here to work with them to resolve those issues and to get on to proactively tackle them long before they become even far more difficult than we can deal with later on in life.
Anything you'd like to add to members of the community who are not able to make it here tonight? Any number one mission or goal you're trying to accomplish here? Well,
number one mission is this campus is here for our community. We're here to help our community, not only economically, but socially. And we have the economic issues are obvious. They're in the paper every day as we read about the ebb and flow of inflation rates and governor's budget and all that. We tend to focus a lot of time on that. But the social issues also, we're very involved and integrated into the social issues of our community. In fact, we have nearly 35% of our students that are involved in volunteer work throughout the community, from the ports to the public schools, from the health industry to the girls and boys clubs. So we are very integrated into community, and this community is very welcome on this campus, and we're a very vibrant part of this community's growth.
Now, you've come all the way out from Washington, D.C. to talk with our community of Long Beach tonight at this town hall. What's the purpose of this event? What message do you want to get across?
I want to listen, and I want to tell them how important they are to the economy of the country and moving freight. We want to sit here and say what's working here, what lessons can we take from LA Long Beach and spread around the country. And I want to make sure that our part of the department, which is a very large presence in the security work here, is working smoothly with the business community, with government leaders, and with the people who have to move freight.
The ports that are located in the community here of the university, how important are they to the country?
They're a gigantic part of the economy, really. They move a huge portion of the freight that comes into the country. It's a very, very busy port. It's a very active port, but it's an innovative port, too, where we're trying to work with the port to pioneer some techniques to make security stronger here.
Since 9/11, the topic tonight is post 9/11. I know you can't go into too much detail, but what has been the escalation of change in your department?
Well, we didn't exist as a department on 9/11. I happened to be the number 2 guy at the transportation department on 9/11, so the Coast Guard was part of the Department of Transportation at the time. The new Transportation Security Administration didn't exist. We built it after 9/11, and both of those entities came into the new DHS. DHS and the country as a whole has been working to secure infrastructure, investing in technology, investing in changes about how we operate. There's a real threat to our world these days from terrorism. It's not a threat that will disappear over a week or go away from us. So we have to be prepared for a long game of success here.
Anything else you'd like to communicate to the community here, the people who weren't able to make it in and actually see this face to face?
Well, what I'm impressed with is all of the men and women that I've met by walking around and watching them work and seeing the passion that they have about making this port safe, this port effective, this port efficient. And that's something that makes you proud to be around people who are committed to this mission. So the security of the port is a national priority, and I'm here to say that I see a lot of talented men and women who are making that their priority.
As port director for the city, what do you want people involved in the community to know about what's happening down at the ports?
Well, I think it's important to have an event like this and this type of venue where the public is welcome to understand exactly what we do for national security. We have a cargo security strategy in place that employs risk management principles. We secure in depth through layers. Every container that comes here, we had over 5 million containers in fiscal year 2006, which is 45% of the nation's total. We are the largest seaport in the country, and the next number 2 through 10 in the country actually equal the size of LA Long Beach. So this is a significant port, and it's just critical that everyone knows what we do day in, day out, as far as we get information in advance on each container. Each container is thoroughly screened through sophisticated automated targeting systems, and that we have full radiation portal monitors out there. Every container that comes into the port is actually screened for radiological emissions to make sure there's no nuclear devices or radiological devices in the containers. And we have extended our zone of security out through programs such as Container Security Initiative and through Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism. So there's multiple layers where we secure our defenses here, and I'm not sure everyone is aware of what we do day in, day out to make sure that every container coming into this country here at LA Long Beach is being screened, and we significantly enhance security through our layered approach.
Is there a number one goal you're trying to accomplish by being here tonight?
Number one goal is just awareness, so everyone knows what our cargo security strategy is, and everyone is well versed in what we do and just knows that they know that we're out there day in, day out doing our best to protect the country.
And what are you looking to communicate to the public at this evening's town hall?
What I'm looking to do as the captain of the port is to tell them what my role is and what are the things that I hope to get others to do. One of my roles as the captain of the port is the Federal Maritime Security Coordinator, and in that role my job really is to try to get everybody to work together for port security issues from the federal level.
Anything you're looking to specifically learn about tonight or take away from this event?
I think this is one of the important venues that you can get the concerns, in that it is a town hall meeting. You get the concerns raised from the audience and from the participants, and you have a great panel of experts that'll be answering a number of the different issues.
Anything else you'd like to communicate to the public this evening?
One of the other things that I would hope to convey to those who are here is that port security is something that's very, very important. The further we get away from 9/11, the more complacent as a society we become. And we really need to keep that, we need to keep vigilant, because there are people out there who want to hurt us.
Mario, what is one of your goals tonight? What are you looking to accomplish from this town hall meeting?
Well, I think one of the goals here is to become as informed as possible in terms of the trend, the ongoing trend with regard to our security needs. Clearly, in the last 5 years or so, the emphasis has been with the airports. And I think the government has to place a big emphasis with their water ports. Admittedly, in the last year or so, there's been more discussion in Washington about the water ports. And in fact, more grant money has been allocated. But bottom line, I think, in my opinion, for being a major port, both the Port of Long Beach and Los Angeles, we need to ascertain and be aggressive in securing as much money to really adequately secure these ports here in the United States.
Mario, I know you are a major part of the Long Beach community, from this side of it to arts and nonprofit organizations. What do you want people in the community to know about what's happening here tonight, people who can't make it out?
Well, I think what I'd like people to get the message that we are, the Port of Long Beach and the City of Long Beach, we have been very aggressive in securing funding to make this a safe port.
And any other number one goal, number one mission out of tonight, something you're looking to accomplish?
Well, I think our number one goal is to have all the stakeholders here communicate that to the representatives of government, that the emphasis on is a priority to obtain funding, because the number one goal is, again, to make sure that these ports are as secure as possible.
Richard, you've played a major role in this town hall event for the last 8 years. Can you tell us how you've seen it transpire over the years?
The biggest evolution has actually been the fact of how important an event this has become for the industry. Initially, this was very much dominated by the union and issues near and dear to the union's heart. And what has evolved over the last several years, particularly since 9/11, is a more community and broadly industry-based evening, where a great deal of issues that are much more general in interest have been brought up here. Things like infrastructure and security, of course.
You're moderating tonight's panel, which our panelists are long lists of very high-profile individuals in the community. What is it you're trying to get across to the public?
Well, I'm not so much trying to get something across to the public as I want the public to have an opportunity to ask the questions that are of most importance to it. It's probably the only opportunity that many members of the community, not just the industry, but the broader community in Long Beach, would have an opportunity to talk to somebody like the top person at TSA, or the top person at Customs and Border Patrol, the FBI. These kinds of opportunities to ask questions of these individuals just really aren't available to many people.
If you had to sum up in one sentence the number one mission behind this event, the purpose, what would it be?
I think to reassure the community at large that everything that can be done to protect our community is being done.
What is the purpose of tonight's event, and what role are you playing here this evening?
I am one of the welcome speakers tonight, and tonight's event is a town hall meeting that we've had over the past 9 years here. And what it is it's kind of an educational tool and a teaching tool, as well as kind of an awareness tool for the community and industry and business and labor to try to show where we're at and where things are going security-wise.
Can you sum up briefly where we're at to those who are not here this evening to hear it firsthand?
You know, port security has never been more important. We've turned into an import economy. The United States is based on an import economy, and everything is funneled through two major ports on the West Coast, LA Long Beach. 40% of all cargo comes through these two ports. So port security is absolutely important. As we move forward, where we are today is we're just on the brink of developing both our human resources and our technological resources and putting them together to try to build the best port security possible.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Cal State Long Beach and welcome to the 9th annual State of the Trade and Transportation Industry Town Hall meeting. I still see many empty seats, and I also notice that people come in, and I do know that the people in the foyer can hear me. So I'm asking you to come in and sit down. It's much easier to watch the proceedings from the house here rather than the small screen that I have outside. My name is Marianne Venieres. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for International Trade and Transportation. I'm also the Deputy Director of the Metrans Transportation Center. And I'm pleased and excited to see so many familiar faces in the audience, so many friends. And I'm particularly pleased to welcome our San Diego delegation. I know we have about 40 people here from San Diego who made it all the way up here under the dynamic leadership of Bella Hoyle, the president of the San Diego World Trade Center Association. Over the years, ladies and gentlemen, the CITT Town Hall has received wide recognition, reaching far beyond Southern California in the transportation industry. So I have a little cold, so my voice is a bit cracky. Hang in there with me. But in the meantime, over the years, we have received national recognition in saying this is quite a unique event. And so what we do here is quite important, and I appreciate the good attendance that we have, and I'm still waiting for the folks outside to move in here. The main purpose of our annual town halls is to present and discuss the state of the trade and goods movement industry in the spirit of education. One of CITT's primary function is to provide a neutral forum where all the parties in the logistics industry and its community stakeholders can come together and address the issues and bring about solutions. So every year when the members of the Policy and Steering Committee, you find their names in the booklet that you have on page 6, I believe. Every year, the members of the Policy and Steering Committee come together and they put a lot of thought and effort into selecting a topic. So I would like to take this opportunity to recognize the chair of the CITT Policy and Steering Committee, Marilyn Krager. Would you please stand up and receive a round of applause? And now I'm asking all the members of the Policy and Steering Committee to please stand up and be recognized. Please stand up. As I mentioned, this committee takes a thorough assessment of the state of transportation in determining the theme for our yearly town halls. Now, earlier this evening, when I walked outside in the halls and I talked to some of the people in the lobby, I was amazed how many of the people we call our 4th annual town hall meeting. The 4th annual town hall meeting was the one that we held in the wake of 2011. It was in March 2002. The title then was Time of Transition, New Priorities and Challenges for the Trade and Transportation Industry in Southern California. It was the first time so many people in the industry had an opportunity to get together to learn about and discuss the new phenomenon or the new reality, as it was called, facing now the international trade industry. Many agree that that town hall was invaluable in framing the issue for many people. Now here we are again, 5 years later, no less serious, no less concerned. We're visiting port and cargo security to learn about the most critical challenges regarding the maritime transportation environment. We'd like to find out what progress has been made by government agencies and by industry, how safe our ports are. We want to find out how secure the supply chain is and how we can maintain safety while continuing to move ever-increasing volume. In other words, we have an exciting agenda for you tonight. And we structured our program to allow for many questions from the audience during the panel discussion in particular. And with this, we will keep our introductions of the speakers and the panelists intentionally short. But I encourage you to go to the program booklet and read the background on our very impressive panelists and speakers. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you the president of the California State University, Long Beach, Dr. F. King Alexander.
Thank you, Marianne. I'd like to once again, this is my second time to have the opportunity to welcome all of you to our great campus, our great university. Even though this is the 9th time this group has brought together to do what we do best, which is to address the issues that impact our society, to address the issues that impact the port, and to address all the issues that we think are relevant to not only our campus, our university, but our communities, our region, and our nation. Today, port security is not just our issue alone, it is indeed a national issue, and we put together a panel tonight that you hear a lot more about in the introductions. It's a wonderful panel that I hope will share a lot of insights and information with all of us. But more importantly, I'd just like to share with you what I believe our role is. Our role as a university is to bring people together. It's to bring ideas together. It's to address the solutions together and to work as a community resource to tackle the economic and social needs of Long Beach, of Southern California, and of the nation. Port security is indeed one of those issues. It is an issue that we are involved with as a campus through our research efforts, through our students, through our teaching, and through our faculty. So on behalf of California State University Long Beach, on behalf of our 220,000 alumni, our 37,000 students, our great faculty and staff, I'd like to welcome you back to our town hall discussion on port security and the future challenges impacting our trade and transportation industry. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you, President Alexander. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Mike Metery, who is Port Security Chairman of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union. Mike is going to say a few welcoming words as well.
Thank you, Marianne. I would like to thank everybody on behalf of the ILWU for inviting us here tonight. I bring you tidings from our new president, President Bob McElrath, who's up in San Francisco. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight. Mr. McElrath asked me to represent him here. I am the Director of Port Security for the ILWU. I think it's very important for us to understand this is where it's at. This is where it's happening. We're in LA Long Beach, and this is the port. This is the port complex where everything's brought through. And this is the port that provides thousands of jobs. We have almost 8,000 registered between A and B members in Local 13 alone. When I got into the union, there was only 1,800. That shows you how much we've grown. We could easily have 20,000 longshoremen in this port within the next 6 to 7 years. That shows the growth. The growth is fantastic. More importantly, we represent everyone that works on the terminals, but we also represent the community. And there's nothing more important than discussing the ramifications of port security when you talk about those people that work in the ports and especially that live directly around the port. We have the capability of coming together in venues like this one to create something really, really good. We get together, we discuss the issues. 5 or 6 years ago, with Peter Payton, I was here and we presented 7 problems and 7 solutions. I like to believe that was one of the times when things like 24-hour gates, taking care of capacity problems, warehousing on the docks, that helped initiate these topics into the conversation. And as a result, now we see where those solutions have gone. And hopefully, with meetings like this, we can also provide the best solutions for port security. For those of you out there that may not know, this is a very important teaching tool for the ILWU. We have a lot of our Class B men here tonight. I would like all of our Class B men just to raise your hand real quick to give people an example, just to show them how many are here. I thank you guys for coming. You're on your own dime. You're interested. I appreciate it. This is the future of our port. This is where it's all happening, like I said. And I really hope that this will help provide the solutions in the future. So without anything further, again, I thank you from the ILWU. I hope it's an interesting night, and I hope we come away from this tonight knowing just a little more than we came in with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike Maitre, for your kind words. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to recognize some very special guests that we have in the audience and some dignitaries. As I'm calling your name, would you please stand up, and I'm asking the audience to please hold your applause until I read all the names. That will save us some time. So we're very pleased to have here tonight Vice Mayor Bunny Lowenthal with the City of Long Beach District Number 1, Councilmember Gary DeLong from the City of Long Beach District 3, Rick Velasquez, Office of Supervisor Don Knabe, Sean Peterson, Office of Mayor Bob Foster, City of Long Beach, Linda Iris, Office of Councilmember Ray Gabelish, City of Long Beach, Shane Ivory, which is with the Office of Assembly Member Alan Lowenthal, Joe Gasparov is here, President of Local 63, ILWU. Mike Mendoza, President of Local 13 with the ILWU. Commissioner Mario Cordero with the Port of Long Beach is here as well. And I hope I have not missed anyone, so please, ladies and gentlemen, join me to give a round of applause. Welcome to those people. An event like this is not possible was it not for our sponsors and the generous support that we have received from our sponsors. On the back of your program, you have the logos of our sponsors. They are also here on our banner. Those financial contributions have been added to the main funding source that we receive from the Department of Transportation, U.S. Department of Transportation, and Caltrans. And it is because of that we can offer this event free of admission and free of parking. So please join me in saying thank you to our sponsors. Now, before we get started with the program, I have 2 things that I would like to bring to your attention. The first one is that the proceedings tonight, they will be webcast. The webcast will be available on our CITT website. The address is in your program on the bottom of the agenda on page 1, I believe. The other item is the feedback form that you have in your booklet. It is a green, or is it a green form? Yes. If you would take a moment and fill that out, we are very much interested in what you think of the program. We're also interested in topics that you would like to see addressed with some of our other town hall meetings. Next on the agenda is our video presentation. But first, I want to direct your attention again to your program booklet. In the centerpiece, you find a form or pull-out booklet that's called the Who, What, When, Where, and Why of Port Security. This was done by Dr. Tom O'Brien, who is CITT's Director of Research. What you find is an easy reference that you can use now or later, and Tom pulled together a brief introduction, first of all, of the agencies represented here tonight, a timeline of events, and also a glossary of key security-related terms. And I'm sure you find this not only helpful when you watch the video in a few moments, but as a future reference. Now, also in your program, you find a website, the same website, where you can get more information. We have been putting a white paper on security. This paper is posted online, so please take a moment when you get home tonight, download it and read it. Now let me say a few words about our town hall video today. Dave Kelly, are you in the audience? There he is. Dave Kelly is the director of our own Advanced Media Production Unit here at CSULB. He did an excellent job highlighting the changes in the security landscape in the wake of 9/11. You will learn about measures implemented and increased securities taking place in and around the port complex, as well as increased security throughout the supply chain. Dave Kelly, who wrote the script as well, tells me each year that the team that goes out and does this documentary comes back with a load of impressions that they've gathered in the process of producing the video. Now this year, what struck them most forcefully was the amount and the quality of cooperation among the various agencies as they work to ensure the maritime transportation environment and the communities surrounding the area are safe. I hope this sentiment comes across in this video and helps to convey the determination of the people who are guarding America's front doors. So please enjoy the video. My stage manager, there we go.
After more than 5 years beyond the terrorist attacks of 9/11, numerous actions have been taken to address issues about national security and safety. America's seaports have been identified as significant potential targets. High on the list is the San Pedro Bay in Southern California. A large population base in the surrounding area where approximately 40% of the nation's imports arrive provides a compelling reason for concern. The local ports, in effect, serve as America's front door for goods entering the country. Several academic think tank reports have been written analyzing possible terrorist threats to the Los Angeles Long Beach harbor. Those potential threats range from destruction of key bridges to nuclear blasts to radioactive dirty bombs exploding in containers. Anticipating a devastating occurrence from any of these scenarios, federal, state, and local authorities have adopted strategies and procedures to thwart a terrorist attack in the harbor. Additionally, the global logistics industry has taken a lead role in securing freight. Industry experimentation is underway in the utilization of radio frequency identification devices attached to containers for tracking purposes. Shipping companies recognize that tracking, evaluating, and inspecting suspicious cargoes at the points of origin before loading those goods on ships is a key component to defeating terrorism.
I believe that the opposition would like to interrupt our opportunities to consume and our way of life in general. We've got a very well-developed economy. There are a lot of goods and services flowing through that economy. We're rather adversely affected if that flow is disrupted. So I think a logical opponent, for whatever reason, might look to that avenue as a mechanism for harming us. And because many of these facilities are concentrated, ports in particular, they're likely to be attractive targets.
Various suggestions have been proposed to continuously improve LA Long Beach harbor security. Among the proposed solutions are better intelligence about suspected terrorists and their connections to goods movement, better coordination among security-related agencies at all levels of government, extensive disclosure for all cargo and related manifests, uniform procedures in how goods are packed and moved, and technological advances in tracking and inspecting containers. These procedures would have to be adopted internationally to be effective at the local level. Developments in several of these areas indicate significant progress already has occurred. Soon after 9/11, a movement began to provide better security in trade logistics. In late November 2001, the U.S. Customs Commissioner announced the implementation of the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism, or CTPAT. The partnership involves worldwide customs agencies working with over 6,000 international shipping companies to improve standards for goods movement. Companies that comply with CTPAT standards receive expedited customs processing.
Well, I think the guiding philosophy is the government is partnering with the trade community or the private sector to better secure the supply chain. And I think that's basically the guiding philosophy. We've worked in partnership to develop the CTPAT program. We've developed the security criteria that companies must meet to remain into the program or to be into the program. So I think that's been it's definitely the largest private sector government program that's come after 9/11.
It goes as far as the gating around your plant. You have video cameras, some full-time guards. Those are things that they look at to see if you can meet the criteria. How do you inspect the containers when they come into your plant to be loaded if you're exporting it? How do you inspect the containers that are coming in loaded into your plant before you unload them? Could there be some compromise somewhere along the way? Then you take it externally, then go out to outside of your own internal organization and look at your trucking organizations that you're dealing with. You're looking at your suppliers, you're looking at your carriers, the whole supply chain all the way along the line, and then you in turn have to see if your suppliers are meeting, if they're not CTPAT program, at least they're meeting the criteria.
In late 2002, federal legislation was signed by President Bush that created the Department of Homeland Security, combining 22 separate agencies with responsibility for monitoring borders, rails, airways, seaports, and customs. Another critical piece of federal security legislation in 2002 produced the Maritime Transportation Security Act. In order to comply with the act, ports and terminals across the country have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in perimeter security, access control, communications technology, and security training.
Many of the things that would be included would be perimeter fencing that was reliable, access control, identification of all visitors, maintaining the security systems, equipment, and having communication capabilities for emergency response, as well as to communicate with the Coast Guard and so forth.
San Pedro, where the Port of LA primarily is, we are a port town. We're not a port and a town. And as you see from being in the area, that everything is together. So we have to put a great deal of thought into the constituencies of the people that live adjacent to our facilities and make sure that in anything we do, they're a key consideration in how we move forward. Because we can't just, we have to ensure that the port is secure, but we also have to ensure that if something happens, we have the means and a plan to make sure that these people, that the community gets taken care of as well.
In early 2003, the 24-hour manifest rule came into effect. Customs and Border Protection now requires shippers to provide complete and thorough manifests 24 hours prior to ships leaving foreign ports of origin. A later development involved a mandatory 96-hour notification to the Coast Guard prior to ships arriving in ports of destination. Also before arriving, ships must provide additional information, including complete lists of crew members. The Coast Guard has assumed much more responsibility since 9/11 for stopping and boarding commercial container cargo ships in the effort to disrupt terrorism. If manifests and information about crews, cargo, and passengers are lacking without adequate explanation, ships can be turned away from local ports. Of nearly 500 ships entering the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach monthly, as many as 50 to 60 are boarded and searched by the Coast Guard before docking.
A ship could be boarded with no notice. I mean, I could bring a boarding team right alongside it and board them well before they get into the port, or I could provide them through some notification ahead of time that says I'm gonna board you, and that helps facilitate commerce a little bit when I do that. Or I'll say you're definitely not coming in at all, and prevent them from coming in, which would essentially be turning the vessel around or stopping them until all the questions are answered before we consider bringing them in.
Approximately 4 to 5 million cargo containers are imported through the LA Long Beach harbor annually. On a daily basis, the two ports count 11,000 container arrivals. All of the containers that leave the terminals by truck are scanned by one of the 85 portal radiation monitors. The Port of Oakland was the first seaport in the country to implement portal monitors in April of 2005. Installation of optical character readers at terminal gates was another development that allowed for technological tracking of trucks and containers. Recent actions by Congress, including the Security and Accountability for Every Port Act, should pump about $7 billion of new federal money into seaport security. Matching available funds to demonstrated need is critical. Previously, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach together had received only a third of what had been requested. The prior $60 million received was not proportional on a federal level to the high volume of cargo passing through the local ports. Much of the new funding will be used nationwide for training, increased Customs and Border Protection inspection activities, Coast Guard and port security exercises, and new scanning technology.
People do realize that we have to be partners, that we all bring something vital and important to the table, and we have to leverage our resources. So I have found that we've had great cooperation and coordination with our partnerships, that people are not just looking, at lines of authority and bureaucratic walls that shouldn't exist. We've broken down those walls, and we are cooperating and coordinating.
A secure freight initiative developed by the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Energy has established an International Container Scanning Network, or ICSN. The ICSN has formed partnerships with foreign ports to install radiation detectors and imaging equipment at terminals around the world. Combined with an effort to upgrade the electronic manifest tracking process, containers will undergo intensive scrutiny before setting sail for the United States.
From the very first day of 9/11, our effort has been to figure out ways that we could understand what's inside that container before it's loaded into our ship. So this system of taking a X-ray picture of the contents of the container and taking a gamma ray vision also before the container is loaded, reviewing those pictures, matching the information that CBP has in other documents about various other risks that container may have, will add significantly to the security of our system.
In late 2006, Governor Schwarzenegger signed an executive order creating the California Maritime Security Council. The council includes representatives of Homeland Security, the U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, state agencies, and harbor businesses and labor unions. Action items for the council include identifying threats, improving security measures, coordinating information, and developing a statewide maritime security strategy. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has emphasized prevention of terrorism in the Los Angeles, Long Beach ports since 9/11. The FBI's Long Beach resident agency includes 16 full-time special agents who monitor and help coordinate law enforcement efforts in the Joint Terrorism Task Force. The local JTTF has responsibility for disrupting terrorist plots and relies on the coordination of federal and local agencies, including the Coast Guard and several area police forces. Additionally, the FBI joins with the Coast Guard as co-coordinators of the Area Maritime Security Committee.
Absent any current specific credible threat, we still believe that they're attempting to come. And so that requires a vigilance on our part that we have to be careful that we've got everything in place to maintain that vigilance. So I do not know the answer to why the port has not been hit, why the LA port has not been hit, or why we have not received any significant incident here post 9/11. We keep telling everyone to be vigilant. Sometimes we don't know what that means, and we have a hard time defining vigilant. But it literally takes everybody in the community to be vigilant, and perhaps that's part of it. Perhaps that's part of it.
The majority of incidents that have been discovered by longshoremen, whether it would be people that are smuggled into this port inside of a container, whether it be something dangerous leaking out of a container, whether it be something improperly loaded in a container. It's almost always, almost every single time, it's the longshore workforce that notifies someone, and they're the ones that discover this. And that's why sometimes it's hard to reconcile why authorities don't always look at the union and say, hey, this is my first line of defense. This is the logical people that we turn to. These are the guys on the docks. A lot of them, like myself, we've been here 20, 30 years, 33 years. These are the guys that know. Let's utilize them for their knowledge and their expertise.
Ultimately, everyone agrees that no security system is entirely foolproof. There are lingering questions about empty containers sitting in dockyards and the fact that export containers receive comparatively minor consideration and very little scrutiny. Other issues include the relatively low rate of visual cargo inspections, concerns about security of rail transportation through the harbor, and significant circumspection about the adequacy of information coordination in general. More federal funding is needed to secure the nation's front door in San Pedro Bay. Controlling access into the ports is another unresolved issue. In the final analysis, port security has to become everyone's responsibility. The eyes and ears of the thousands of employees who work in the terminals and harbor complex provide another layer of assessment, adding the human awareness element to the technological solutions. Preventing terrorism in seaports requires all of the resources that the goods movement industry can muster in cooperation with international, federal, state, and local authorities.
There's not a better introduction than that to our topic tonight. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? My name is Jen Giuliano. I'm the director of the Metrans Transportation Center. We are the University Transportation Center that sponsors this event and all of the outreach activities that CITT conducts. We are a partnership of the University of Southern California and The Beach, Cal State Long Beach. And our funding is a partnership, part from the U.S. Department of Transportation and part from Caltrans. Our job is research, educating the next generation workforce, and conducting outreach events such as today. We consider the town hall one of the most important things that we do at Metrans and CITT. This is the one place where we can provide information to absolutely all port interests. That includes public officials, it includes the community, it includes the workers, and it includes the managers and owners. So we are very pleased and very excited to be able to host this event each year. Today, my job is a great one. My job is to introduce the keynote speaker, Michael Jackson, who is the Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. At DHS, he is the COO, the Chief Operating Officer, which means he has the great job of managing the day-to-day operations of a very huge organization. He's very well qualified for the task. He has an impressive background. You can read some of the details in your brochure tonight, but just to give you a few highlights, he is a member of the Board of Directors of Amtrak. He was a Senior Vice President of the AECOM Technology Corporation. He was part of a presidential commission on the implementation of the U.S. state exploration policy. He has served not only in the Bush administration, the present President Bush administration, but also in previous presidential administrations. So a very highly qualified person for the job. In addition, he has a PhD in government from Georgetown University. So I am very pleased to be able to present to you the Honorable Dr. Michael Jackson. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. I feel very much at home, and thank you for that kind invitation. Returning to a university setting, being at Cal State Long Beach is like being comfortable at home with academics, but also from my labor union friends up there, from the people who own and operate assets that make this port work, for the people who do the job of moving freight in this country every day, who get their fingernails dirty and who break their backs doing it. I feel not only at home, but uplifted by being around you, so thanks for the chance to come and visit with you today. I'm very humbled, honestly, to be the Chief Operating Officer. The Chief Washington Puke is what one of my colleagues called me, for a department of 208,000 men and women that range across the full spectrum of work that we have to do to protect this country against terrorism. I've just come back or completed a tour that started over the weekend, really mile by mile of the border, trying to look at the investments of several billions of dollars that we'll be making to try to secure our borders more effectively, to invest technology, to invest in people, and to invest the work that we need to do on building infrastructure. And it ends really here in this great port, this tremendous engine of the U.S. economy, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, because here the issues about bringing security to the maritime border, to this institution, is really writ large in a way that is important for all the rest of the country. I won't repeat the story about how big this port is, how important this port is, how creative this port is, what a partnership that's uniquely established here in the community. Just say that's all true. This is a place to go to see what the future looks like and to try to test ideas to make it stronger. I will just say that I start my morning every morning quite early with a briefing from the CIA, the FBI, the intel community, our operational people, from all of the 7 operating components that constitute this Department of Homeland Security. And I will, without trying to be alarmist, tell you that it really is true that there are many, many bad people there who wished to harm and disrupt this nation, to do so in ways that will create mayhem and economic dislocation for the nation. And so the task at hand is really an urgent task. It's an important task. It's a real task. It's not something that we can set aside. I'm going to try just very briefly to talk about where the maritime security work fits into this pattern. But let me just say, you need some sort of intellectual construct to think about the work of the Department of Homeland Security. This is my dashboard navigator. Across the top of think of a spreadsheet, it's the means of attack: nuclear, chemical, biological, natural disasters. And down the vertical axis is a list of our 17 critical infrastructure segments, of which this port world is so vital, so important, and so connected to the trucking industry, so connected to the global supply chain. So how these modes of attack intersect with these places of attack is the daily work that we're doing in the department. To do this, we have to partner, and that's an overused word, but it's the only word to explain what happens. I started out early this morning walking around this port, this great port, which I've been to many times, and watching the men and women who were unloading containers coming into this country. They are the first line of defense. They are the ones who see things that look a little dinky and stop things from happening by saying, look at that, let's work that. I also watched the men and women of the Customs and Border Protection doing their work, of the Coast Guard doing their work, trying to make this place more secure. I'm going to capture just a minute what we're trying to do, and then I'd be happy to answer a few questions, Jen, if that's okay. In essence, what we would say is we have to find a balance somewhere between mobility and security. They're not goals in conflict, but it does require some prudential judgment. It's about the investments that we're making. Where do we find that balance point? Do we put more money into ports? Do we work the aviation security issues? Do we work the nuclear, chemical, and biological threat vectors? How do we balance the billions of dollars of investment that are being made? And then how do we make sure that we can do this in ways that don't deny us the mobility necessary to keep the economy moving and to preserve our way of life? This is a balance point that shifts over time, but which is constantly our point of reference to make sure that we don't skew it too far one way or another. After 9/11, we decided that we would chase many of these vectors simultaneously, and some things we've done well and some things we haven't done so well. Sometimes we've started out in one direction and discovered we didn't have the solution that we needed, and we had to step back and assess a little bit more and change our mind and move forward. But I think as a whole, I would characterize our progress as very significant. We have made it much harder, but not impossible, to be able to penetrate this network and to damage it. It is not impossible. If we ever get to the point where we felt like we have made the system impermeable, we're either deluding ourselves or we've made it so cumbersome that we can't really work it. So we're looking for these balance points. Initially, after 9/11, we pushed the border out. CITT, the Container Security Initiative, our screening and technology tools to try to understand what's moving into the country, these were all first-generation tools. Now we're settling into the implementation and the delivery and the design of second-generation tools, which are somewhat more complex, which are more integrated across multiple countries and networks, and which are going to take us some time to develop. I want to just mention a couple of them. First of all, we have, as the excellent video here pointed out, an initiative called Secure Freight at the Department of Homeland Security. It's a partnership with the private sector and with the Energy Department and with foreign governments to try to look at containers from coming into the United States from other countries for radiation and other anomalies prior to their arrival here. This is really the next generation of how things will work. Imagine yourself at a port in Asia sending containers to the United States. We'll be able to see those containers and to look at that and assess that container load against multiple things. First of all, a risk assessment analysis, which CBP does and which we're making much more robust, that tries to help us understand the risk of that container. And then we're screening it and using those tools. They're instantly sent around the globe over to this country where we can look at those images and make a determination about whether we're going to let that container come in. Then we have to partner with our foreign partners to open those containers if necessary to resolve any differences that we have about whether the container poses a risk and to move forward, to load the ones that are able to be loaded and get on with business. This is part of the physical inspection that takes place that we can begin to move out in a more systematic way. But I'd like you to understand also that this risk assessment about understanding trusted shippers, understanding the prehistory of a load is going to yield another generation of advanced screening tools. Our idea is to be able to make sure we can screen effectively what's coming into the country and then work with shippers, work with people who are operating in the global supply chain to expedite the movement of containers of less risk. So we're creating a much more complex set of tools to gather data, existing data from the global supply chain, and assess the risk before they come in. This is all about keeping bad things from coming into the country. Let me just tell you the top 3 priorities of the department. The first one is keeping bad people out of the country, keeping terrorists who wish to do harm. That leads us down literally dozens of directions of investment, of programmatic work, to look at people, to facilitate commerce and trade, but to make sure that we're focused on the terrorists, focused on the individuals who do not deserve to come into the country without scrutiny. Keeping bad things out of the country is the second of these objectives, and that's what this whole conference is all about. How do we make sure we secure our ports and keep bad things from coming in those containers? And finally, our third biggest priority is protecting our critical infrastructure. This precious asset that you have in this community, which gives life to this community in the port, is one of the nation's precious assets. It's one of the most important engines of our economy. It's your local economy, but it's the country's economy here. And so how do we do this in some systematic and deliberate way? I want to try to just say a little bit about one program that is part of this keeping the port safe. It's the Transportation Worker Identification Card. This is a law that was passed by Congress that requires us to know across the spectrum of our infrastructure who is coming into our ports, who are coming into our airports, who are driving our trucks. And this sort of program is about to kick off here at this port as a first example, as a leading wedge of trying to make this work right. We will not move rashly in this area. We will move with a lot of collaboration and listening to the workers who have to have the cards, to the infrastructure owners who have to manage this system, and to the port owners who have to move and operate these systems and networks, to the community at large here. Let me just explain the 2 parts of it. First is the issuance of a biometrically secure card identifying each individual who has unescorted access to the port facilities, to facilities covered under MITSA, the regulatory regime of the Coast Guard. In this way, what we can do is do an appropriate background investigation, not overly burdensome, not unfair, not unreasonable, but solid, to make sure that people are living in the country legally and that they have records that are appropriate for work in this environment. They will then have this card which will have biometrics on it that we can use to manage access to the ports. The first phase of this, which begins as an initiative here and in 2 other ports around the country this spring, is to issue these cards. Initially, what we'll do is set up distribution points. I hope that my friends from the ILWU will invite us to come down to your union hall, to places where it's convenient for you to be, to watch us and help us make this retail distribution part work effectively and efficiently. We will issue cards, and when we get to a stage where there is sufficient penetration, we'll give, under the direction of the captain of the port here, enough time of warning to say at a certain point these will be obligatory for anyone to be in the port. They'll have to have a card for unescorted access. This will then be followed at a second stage down the road, not immediately, and again with some considerable time to make sure that we have the systems with card readers to be able to allow us to check the biometrics as people enter the ports. This will allow us to have this closed loop system. It'll operate quickly. It'll work fairly. If someone is initially denied the ability to have a card, to have their livelihood because of a conflict with the statutory requirements for this card, there is an appeals process. There's a reconciliation process, and we will work that very carefully. We've had experience in this in hazardous material licenses for truck drivers, and there's a very, I think, user-friendly way to work through some issues there that allow people to make their case for why they deserve special attention or special review. So this is a 2-part phase. When it's done, and this will take us a bit of time, what we'll find is a credential that helps us know who is working in that port environment where you're making your livelihood. We will have followed this with significant investment on radiation portal monitor work, which you're already seeing, on efficiencies and trying to clear a better understanding of what's coming in and how to move it out more efficiently. There will be investments in technology. There'll be investments of more workers in our ports within the DHS community. We're here to try to help close the risk profile as much as possible. I think what I would like to do is just say that I would be happy to answer a few questions. I could probably drone on endlessly about the multiple aspects of our work in this together, but what I really want to say is we can't make this work as a federal cram down. We have to make this work in ways that are tailored to the community in which we work, that learn from the people who do this business, that take examples from you and work in partnership with you in a way that means we're not the guys who have a monopoly on all the right answers. This is an innovation cycle. It's a commitment of passion to do the work that you do. I saw out on those docks today the passion that the men and women bring to maintaining those cranes, to moving those loads, and to looking at the security of this country as their job, as well as the men who are wearing these distinguished blue uniforms out there on the docks with you, or who are taking that Coast Guard blue out into the water to help protect us. So this is something that we will learn from you with, we'll work with you on, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about Homeland Security is working to help improve security for ports.
And it is my pleasure to introduce your moderator tonight, Richard Hollingsworth. There you go.
Good evening. As Marianne said, I'm your moderator this evening. I've been looking forward to this particular evening with great anticipation. Clearly there is much to discuss, and while the panelists take their seats, I will lay out the ground rules so we can make the most of our time here. First, I will introduce our panelists, and I will keep the introductions deliberately brief and simply suggest that you read their full bios on page 4 of your program. I will start with a question to each of the panelists. I will then open the floor to questions from the audience. This is when we begin the Q&A part of the program. I will accept your last question about 8:15. I say about 8:15 because we're a little late in the program at this point. In terms of how we will proceed with the actual Q&A part of the evening, I want to direct your attention to page 2 in your program, where you will find the guidelines that we established for the Q&A segment of the program. And in brief it states, when you want to ask a question, go to the microphones, as you can see they're on both sides of the hall. Give your name, affiliation, and address your question to a specific panel member. Please keep your questions brief and to the point, and avoid making statements or repeating questions that have already been asked. No long-winded questions presentations disguised as a question. No multi-part questions. That means you too, Patty. No discussions concerning particular terminals or operations, please. No questions concerning specific issues being negotiated between employers and unions. If you prefer, you can submit your questions on a 3x5 card. We have ushers in the hall who are circulating with cards and pencils. Keep to today's topic. And finally, as a moderator, I have sole discretion to reject a question as inappropriate, defer it as having been previously asked, or redirect a question to another panelist. I'm here to enforce appropriate decorum and keep the meeting running smoothly. For those of you who already know your questions and who would like to fill them out on a 3x5 card, please raise your hand. Now, as you can see on my left here, the panel is from Customs and Border Patrol, Todd Hoffman, Captain Wiedenhöft from the Coast Guard, John Schwartz from TSA, Ethel McGuire from the FBI, and Ken Königsberg from Boeing. I'm going to start off with a general question first, and this would go to Todd Hoffman. Very simple question. If we are the target of a 9/11 type of attack, are we ready?
Yes, I believe we are ready. We have continuity of operation plans in place in the event of a critical incident that would occur here at the port. We could stand up operations and set up in a different venue. We have offices all over the port of entry, and if need be, we actually can go to LAX and run operations out of LAX. If there was a critical incident or catastrophic event, we could set up elsewhere and do our targeting and so forth. We get advanced information on all containers that are coming in. We can use that for forensics, if you will, that we would know all the containers that are at sea at any given time. We have thousands and thousands of containers at sea, so we'd be able to do that type of analysis to resume the trade lane. We also have participated in numerous tabletop exercises that have been hosted by the U.S. Coast Guard here, Captain Wiedenhoff, and also by Department of Defense. And we also participate on many committees throughout the port, so we're always having the discussion on what do we need to be ready, increasing our levels of preparedness, response, and recovery.
Thank you. Captain Wiedenhoff, how do you view the Coast Guard's role in securing our ports? Are you the first line of defense or the last line of defense?
Am I the first? Well, I think the video already said that that the ILWU was the first line of defense. But I would think, really, as I look at it, we are involved quite frankly as the first and the last. We talk about layered security, about a number of the initiatives that you've seen already before we're involved in. Some of those protections that keep stuff out of the port. We don't even want to see it here, and we're going to take the steps that are necessary to ensure that's going to go up or to keep it out. And that's going to take the cooperation with our other federal partners, our state partners, and our local partners to keep it out. As far as the last line, I mean, Todd already alluded to it, and that's the fact that we're actually doing training and ensuring that we have plans in place that can respond to or mitigate any type of disaster, whether it's man-made, brought in here, intentionally, accidentally, or even natural.
Thank you, Captain. My next question, if I can find it, is for John Schwartz, and that would be, can you explain your role in port and supply chain security? This will be for TSA.
Thank you. Well, I think that the excellent video that we saw earlier outlined the number of different areas that we have to be concerned with in port security. The Transportation Worker Identification Credential Program, or the TWIC program, fills that need for the identity management portion of our layered security program. Simply put, we want to make sure that the secure areas of our port admit only those workers that have passed the background check and represent no threat. Or even more simply put, we want to keep the bad guys out, and we have to give you a tool to do it. The program particularly is interesting from the standpoint that it's a joint partnership, to use the Secretary's words, between the federal government, the facility and vessel operators, and the workers themselves. The federal government provides the infrastructure of the program and the security threat assessment to assure that only those who have passed the security threat assessment are admitted. The port operators, the facility operators, and vessel operators that come under the MITSA program, they provide the infrastructure and the process and the procedures that support this effort. And finally, the workers themselves are an integral part to the program. They provide their information to allow us to make the threat assessment, their biometrics, and their credential. The end result of this is that our aim is to have one card produced in a uniform and secure manner that can be trusted all across the country, so that the workers know that a partner who's working with them, even if they don't know that person individually, they know that he has a TWIC card and he's passed a uniform set of requirements.
Thank you. And now for Ms. McGuire from the FBI. Given how we've all had to switch gears after 9/11, how prepared are we for a terrorist threat, and how would you best describe the change in culture in the security agencies since 9/11?
I'll speak diligently on that. What we've done since 9/11 for our agency, the FBI, we have had to enhance. We actually had to reinvent our wheel We went from 50-50 criminal and national security to more national security. For Los Angeles, we have increased our counterterrorism resources from approximately 3 squads to 16 squads. In addition, we have all our resident agencies have a counterterrorism component. What we've done locally in Long Beach, we created or established about 2 years ago a critical infrastructure squad, which is we refer to diligently as our port squad. That squad has the responsibility for not only Long Beach Airport, but the Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach and LAX. And what we do, we actually operate in a task force environment. The task force, our agents, I think you heard on the video earlier that our assistant director spoke of vigilance, vigilance for everyone involved. Our 10 agents, I believe that he spoke of 16 agents, is actually more than that. We have 2 squads locally, one specifically for the port, and then another one for just international terrorism operations solely. And in addition to that, we have approximately 60 task force officers who also augment our resources. And with the addition of those task force officers, we are able to vet our information, vet threats, cover leads, and just have an information pipeline both in and out to vet any terrorist act or potential terrorist act in our territory. Thank you.
Now, before we turn to the last panelists here in the first round of questions, I'm getting lots of cards up here. I guess, I don't know if everybody's feeling a little shy this evening, but please feel free to go to the mics and get ready to ask questions directly. The final opening panel question is to Kenneth Koenigsmark, who is the Senior Manager of Supply Chain Security with the Boeing Company. And it's giving us the private sector's perspective. And Ken, it would appear that Boeing is being very proactive in dealing with threats with supply chain. What is driving this proactivity?
Well, a couple things. I think we'd start on 9/11 and realize if you're a Boeing employee, you take it personally when it was your products that were used in the attacks. So that makes us extremely concerned. Combined with the fact that we're the #1 exporter in the U.S. and the #2 defense contractor, which by nature then we have to assume we're a viable target, even though we're a private company. So in that kind of an environment then, even though prior to 9/11 we really had no supply chain security issues. We didn't have theft, we weren't getting smuggled goods in with our cargo. But after 9/11, we and I think everybody in industry as well as the government recognized that supply chains are vulnerable to other activities that no one had really even taken seriously or thought of before. And so we do take it seriously, and we've formed a company-wide office staffed by 4 full-time employees and company-wide teams focused on supply chain security, working it from the point of origin of every one of our hundreds of supply chains around the globe, all the way until the point that those goods reach Boeing, and trying to assess, improve, enhance the security at every point along the way. So it's an enormous undertaking, but industry is essential because we own those supply chains, and we have to be active, eager partner with the government in protecting the homeland here.
Thank you. Do we have a question over here on the right?
Mr. Schwartz, I'm from Arizona, and I represent the security director for the intermodal trucking company. And we've been hearing about the QUIC program for quite some time now. I know that there are things in place right now for people to get the QUIC coming up this spring, I understand, here in California. But how, for a company our size, we have over 120 drivers currently that are scattered all over the state of Arizona, are we going to be able to get QUIC cards for our people? And when can we see this coming?
Well, I'll answer the last question first, and that is that we do not have a actual deployment plan, so I can't answer specifics tonight as to exactly when the program will start in a certain area. One of the things that we did require with our industry partner, Lockheed Martin, the contract that we awarded here several weeks ago, is the requirement to reach out to the areas where the workers who will require QUICs and reach out and establish an enrollment center or site so that they can come there and get their cards. Now, most of those sites will be sited in port areas. There's 130 ports that have been listed that are sites where we will, in fact, conduct enrollments. However, Lockheed Martin has adopted sort of a hub and spoke approach to it, and so they're going to move into an area and then perhaps have several mobile or satellite enrollment centers for a brief time to get those initial enrollments. So we hope to work with them and once again have your feedback. One of the other things I want to mention as part of this unique contract and partnership with the government, we're establishing an advisory committee that will be an avenue to have industry reach both TSA, the Coast Guard, and the contractor for problems such as reaching workers and employers who need to get quick cards. Thank you.
Thank you. On my left over here.
My name is Jeff Thompson. I represent DHO Global Port here in Los Angeles. Hoping to get this question to Dr. Jackson earlier, but I'll direct it to Todd Hoffman. The terrorists have really only beaten us if we panic and, God forbid, Congress does something crazy like demand 100% cargo inspection of all containers here at the Port of Long Beach, which we all know. We'd all seen empty shelves of Walmart within a couple of weeks if that happened. Do you happen to know what the government is doing to manage the ensuing panic that might occur if, God forbid, there were a terrorist action?
What the government is doing, well, as I mentioned before, we have tabletop exercises that we've been engaged in to actually restore the supply chain. At headquarters level, with Coast Guard and Customs and Border Protection, they're working on a business resumption plan to restore trade in the event of a catastrophic event. And, you know, we're working at many levels on the preparedness. Various area maritime security committees and so forth, everyone's getting together to know what their role is in the event of an attack. But just getting back to your earlier comment about 100% inspection, I mean, there was blood in the water with that issue. I worked at back before I arrived here in October. I worked at the other end because I worked in D.C. at headquarters level. And we were working with the staffers because a lot of congressional types wanted 100% inspection when they really didn't know exactly what that entails. So I think through the Safe Ports Act, we're taking a very good approach to it, and we're doing 6 pilots overseas, and that's under the Secure Freight Initiative is the latest title that's being used, whereby at the 6 ports overseas, we will integrate radiation portal monitors with large-scale non-intrusive inspection technology and an OCR, an optical character reader, that ties it all together in one package. So that's a very deliberate, practical approach to find out what we can do with our overseas partners to push the examination as much as we can overseas. But you have to remember, is when we talk about going overseas, you know, it's Big Brother saying what the overseas partners should do, the overseas governments, what they should do. And what it takes here day in, day out to do examinations, when you say it's hard to necessarily pitch to them at times, when you tell them workload issues and what they can expect as far as workload, they have their own resource issues. So anytime you tell a sovereign nation that, you know, we're coming here, we're here to help you, but you help us, but you have to do X amount of exams a day on our behalf, I mean, that gets a little dicey, because anytime we go into a foreign country, we don't have the authority. We're there as guests, and we look over their shoulder, and we work closely with them under the Container Security Initiative, and that's what this is, broadening out the Container Security Initiative. But again, you're on foreign soil. We have officers working in 50 different countries overseas, which represents the 50 different countries is 82% of all cargo coming into the U.S. But again, at the end of the day, we're guests, and 100% is we're looking at it by doing these 6 pilots that represents, I believe, 7% of the cargo coming in to see if something like this would work through technology. So we're working on many different fronts.
Thank you. I'm just going to just one-part questions for everybody, so I'm going to move to the next person here. But before I turn to Captain Ashmeyer here, on a card here, I have a question. I'm going to throw this question to Ethel McGuire and possibly Captain Budenhoeft. If a terrorist attack occurred, are the surrounding communities prepared today?
I'll take it. Are they prepared? I'd say they're more prepared than they were at 9/11. But the further we get away from 9/11, it seems like each one who hasn't been involved in the actual enforcement or the vigilance that's needed to watch for terrorism tends to forget and tends to become complacent. There are things that we can do in preparation for it. We have all the agencies, the federal, state, local agencies that are working together, all the labor, all the industry is working to mitigate any type of terrorist event that happens, but the communities themselves, there are community organizations out there that want to make sure that people are ready and prepared, but they need more involvement from the members of the community. That'll help you understand or manage your own expectations on what you think. If you're expecting an immediate response from somebody, some agency to come give you food and turn your power right back on, that's probably not going to happen right away. You need to personally and within the communities have the opportunity to organize a little bit closer and be more involved in the community efforts to mitigate the problems that are going to arise after any kind of event like that.
Okay. Ethel, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I would just like to add to that. With the cooperation of all our law enforcement partners and the different committees that we sit on and our constant, I want to say, information sharing or dissemination of information, the things that we do and we look at daily is how to harden targets. And we hear that a lot in the law enforcement community because that cooperation that we share teaches us where our vulnerabilities are. And what we do is try to prepare for or prevent a terrorist attack. And I believe that's all the mission, all of our mission is to identify, detect, prevent, and deter a terrorist attack. And that's what we work for every day. We've been very lucky, so far. We've worked hard, we're doing the right things in terms of preparedness, but we're never prepared enough. And the community are our eyes and ears. And you're the ones who provide us with those leads, those pieces of information that we use, and we can hone in on that information and determine if it's viable, if it's not, and what we need to do with it at that point. And so it's full cooperation, not only with law enforcement, we work with other stakeholders, anyone who has interest in the community, certainly are arms and ears and what we need.
Okay, thank you. Captain Ashmeyer.
Yes, good evening, Manny Ashmeyer with the Marine Exchange. One of our constituencies includes the American flag mariners that are sailing, licensed mariners, documented mariners. And the question we get occasionally is the fact that when they achieve these licenses and documents from the Coast Guard, there's a pretty rigorous background check done, and there's a degree of qualifications that must be demonstrated and proven. And the question they have is, with the TWIC card coming in on top of that, it seems to be redundant, and it seems to be, in some cases, a burden to them to have to go through that again once having done their documentation as a merchant mariner. So I guess the question is there any thought of having some kind of a dovetail situation for the American flag merchant mariners that are still sailing to somehow accept their merchant marine documentation in lieu of the TWIC card? And that's the question we get. Thank you.
I guess, John, that'll be for you.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm pleased to say that there is a mechanism. We are working with the Coast Guard, and mariners, United States mariners that have merchant mariner documents may use the background check that they have passed through the Coast Guard and apply that to the background check that they would get with the TWIC card or substitute for it. We've deemed the background check to be comparable. Now, of course, the TWIC card itself, we still need them to go through the enrollment process because there's a certain way that we verify the identity and more importantly, we need to gather the information to put the biometric on the card and actually issue the card. So there will be a reduced fee for people that choose to use their background check. There is one condition, though, and that is that the date of the background check would be, or the expiration of the quick card would be 5 years from the date of the last background check. So mariners can consider whether they want to use the Coast Guard check or whether they want to just establish a new card for 5 years. Now then the Coast Guard, and I'll let Captain Wiedenhoff perhaps follow up on that. Of course, the Coast Guard has some additional checks that they do as part of their safety and security checks.
Captain Ashmeyer, I don't have anything to follow up on that right now.
Thank you.
It is, as Mr. Schwartz said, it is clearly part of that thing to try to integrate those two.
This question from the audience goes to Kenneth Königsmark. What does Boeing, and if indeed you would talk on behalf of the whole private sector, what does Boeing want the government? What role does Boeing want the government to play in securing the supply chain? And then, as an added little question there, what do you expect of your vendors these days in light of the changed situation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So 2 parts. The first part would be the government, and I think on behalf of industry as a whole, what the industry would not like to see is hard and fast regulation that may or may not make sense in various business models. So the way the current CITT program is approached is with some degree of flexibility that allows a company to tailor their response internally and with their vendors to their business model and the nature of their supply chains. So what's good for the Boeing company may not be good for someone that's importing shoes. It's a total different animal. So no hard and fast regulations, but some degree of flexibility. I think the other things we need from the government are, we are a private company, as are the rest of the private companies. We don't have the assets the government has to provide threat and risk information. So a better flow of information to industry is desired on where we need to be most vigilant, where there may be threats that we need to be aware of. So I know that's a common theme in industry as well. Another thing we've run into is the whole aspect of international cooperation. And you know, the Boeing company is a big company, but we don't broker agreements between nations, and so we do need the government to work those kinds of issues on cooperative supply chain security initiatives between various nations. The last thing industry wants to see is one set of rules involving cargo coming into the U.S., but another set of rules on cargo going into the European Union or to Japan, and get a hodgepodge of different programs, and you'd have to package and ship a different way no matter where it goes. We don't want to see that. The second part of the question?
Have your expectations of your vendors changed in light of 9/11?
Yeah. We've had no contract language that really discussed security at all up until recently. I mean, it was not a problem. It was not something we really worried about. So we have to form a whole new relationship with our suppliers and our logistics providers on every step along the way of our supply chain to first educate and make them aware that there is a threat and what they need to do about it, to improve the security of their facilities and operations. And then, you know, we are integrating new contract language in that makes it mandatory that you have to have security built into your processes if you're going to do business with the Boeing company.
Okay, thank you. Next question, there's no designee on this, so I have to designate somebody. Homeland Security says that the longshoremen are the eyes, the first eyes and ears and the first line of defense on the docks. Would it be a good idea to train or inform the longshoremen so they can better be alert and prepared for an emergency? I'm going to throw that to you, Captain, since you're the most obvious person down there on the waterfront.
Yes, would it be a good idea to train them? As we have a program in the Coast Guard called America's Waterways Watch, which deals specifically with what to report. Report suspicious activity. Okay, well, if you're going to report suspicious activity, how do you know what's suspicious? Well, you guys that are out there working the docks know what's
what's unusual, what's the norm. Those are important things for us to know as well. But can we give you the tools? Yes. There's an initiative going on right now to be able to deploy some type of training, and I think we have a couple of facilities that are out there right now that will help to test this little program, and that is recognizing terrorist-like activities or threats to your facilities that you're working on. Those type of things are available, and they're being worked on, and we hope to get them deployed as we go forward.
Thank you.
There are other programs. I would think the CITT program that helps with response if there is a disaster that happens, and we do need assistance from individuals in helping train them. I think the CIRT program is being trained pretty well through the ILWU.
I'd like to, can I add?
Yes, please.
I would just like to add to that. Customs and Border Protection, we're out there day in, day out. In light of any additional training, it's just clear cut, open communication and dialogue. We're out there with the radiation portal monitors. That is a program that created new work locations. So we have officers staffed during operational hours from 0700 to 0300, if that's when the terminal is open. You have officers at the terminal. You're all familiar with our booth that's out there. And we also, when we take our large-scale technology out, we're generally out in each port at least twice a day, and we're doing different patrols and so forth, so we're always available. If there's any information to be shared, please, we're there.
Thank you. And since you're on the mic, here's a follow-on question. Why is there so little attention paid to security of export containers?
I would not say there's little attention. Obviously, based on this forum here and the video we saw, I mean, obviously we have our hands full protecting the homeland with just inbound containers and the tremendous volume that we see here. We had 5 million containers arrive here in 2006. From 2002 to 2006, we saw a 77% increase in containers. 45% of the containers arrive here at LA Long Beach. So it's just tremendous growth. We've always concentrated on exports, but in terms of exports, we do a lower percentage of exports. We concentrate on critical technology that can be exported, that can be used against us later, whether it's a terrorist organization or a nation state. Technology that's exported that would require a Department of State license or a Department of Commerce license. So we have been focusing on exports for a number of years.
Thank you. Next question goes to Ethel McGuire. What landside threat to our ports do you see, and what is being done to control these? What landside threats do you see to our ports, and what is being done by the FBI to control these?
What we do, initially when we get our threats, we receive most of our threats from our headquarters or from our intelligence community, our information on the threat. The threats as they come in, they'll go through our Joint Regional Intelligence Center, and we have a squad that responds only to landside threats. Threats not only in the port, but as well as the 7 counties in Los Angeles. What the squad does, they vet every lead, every incoming lead, and we're talking probably on a monthly basis, maybe about 200 or 300 threats. And we have to vet those all the way through logical conclusion just to determine, 1, if it's viable, 2, if we need to open a case on it, or 3, if it's something that we can put to bed. But once we receive the threat, whether it's landside or even if it's international, once we receive that threat, we are obligated to then share that information to the respective agencies that may have a need to know. And once we dedicate the resources, we have, I think let me say, changes, I'm sorry. We reassessed our resources. We have different teams, specialized teams to address threats as they come in, depending on what they are. And so once we determine where that threat should be, whether it's either landside or whether it's whether it's not, if it's something on the port, if it's on the waterways. We have a maritime liaison agent who works daily with the port. We have we have a squad designated specifically. We have cross-designated our agents to work with the Coast Guard, as well as we have Coast Guard working with our agents. So we're daily in tune to the types of threats that are coming in, regardless of whether they're on the water or on land. But whichever way it goes, we are communicating back and forth with the various entities, whether it's CBP, whether it's ICE, whether it's the Coast Guard. We are vetting the threat through its entirety just to make sure it's satisfied through a logical conclusion.
Thank you. Captain, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I'd just like to point out that the FBI has been a great partner. We talked about some of the what changes that the FBI has made since 9/11. I think that they've become great partners in sharing intelligence and potential threats. And that's really helping all the agencies work together. When we get an agency like the FBI becoming a good partner, then we can all work a lot better together, and it's been helping out a lot.
Thank you. Next question for John Schwartz. What are the biggest lessons TSA has learned since 9/11 in regard to preventing a terrorist incident? And how do these lessons apply to the ports where we cannot X-ray every incoming container?
Well, I can't speak too clearly on the container issue. Of course, the TWIC program covers the identity management issue, but certainly we've learned a lot through all of our actions, speaking for the credentialing aspect of things at the Transportation Security Administration, the air cargo, the rail cargo, and the cargo that comes in and out of our ports, through processes where we have established various committees, groups from industry that has come in and talked to us. So through these mechanisms, we've really learned a lot. Particularly in the TWIC program, I think it's important that we've been through a lengthy process of both conducting 2 tests, first a technology test and then a pilot test of our prototype system. We work with the Secretary's National Maritime Security Advisory Committee. We have worked with them as we published a rule. And then when we did come out with a rule, we hear more from the entire nation as far as their security concerns and how our TWIC card may improve that or how it may interface with other facilities. So through these mechanisms, I'd say that's how we populate our information that helps us make decisions on where to go next with our next initiatives.
Thank you. Next question is for Todd Hoffman. Do you think the inspection of empty containers entering any port or marine terminal should be a required part of a port security program?
Yes, and it is, and it has been. Basically, under the CITT minimum security criteria for sea carriers that became effective March 1st, 2006, all sea carriers have to visually examine empty containers at the foreign port prior to being loaded on the ship at the foreign port. And also all containers, empty containers that arrive here at the port go through our radiation portal monitors, and we also examine the empty containers when we do operations on the dockside, high line, and so forth. So the empty containers are looked at quite closely. And you have to remember, CTPAT carriers make up the vast majority of the carriers come in here. 98% of the containers are carried by CTPAT carriers. So they're doing a visual exam of the containers prior to being laden at the foreign port. Can we do more as far as empty containers? I think we can do the whole motto with CTPAT is trust but verify. I think we can do a little more on the trust but verify end, and the Safe Ports Act calls for this year that we will do pilot assessments to assess the vulnerability of empty containers that are arriving inbound.
Thank you. This question is to Captain Budenhoft. From the Coast Guard's perspective, what changes could be made to the way we identify, prioritize, and fund port security needs in this country?
We try to do risk assessments, or vulnerability assessments for all the facilities, for all the vessels, regardless of what wherever the vector or whatever. I think the Deputy Secretary was talking about all the different sectors which a threat might come to. So we're looking at all those different areas. What can we do better? We can continue to improve our risk assessments, to continue to revisit it, continue to use technology, continue to improve the communications among all our partners involved in security, and we can continue to improve. I mean, we have things that are going online right now. We talk about TWIC and a number of the other programs that are coming on here. Those are going to need to continue. We'll bring those online and improve them as we get there. I don't think they're going to be perfect when we get them out the gate, but we're going to continue to work on that.
Thank you. Do you have a question on the right here?
Yes. My name is Peter Joseph. I live in Long Beach, and I'm just a citizen here representing myself. If there were some sort of a scenario where there was a dirty bomb that just exploded, what would be the procedures that would be undertaken? Who would take the responsibility for taking care of this, and how would this be taken care of by different agencies?
Thank you.
Something specific. Would local people be involved? How would it be done?
Captain, I'm going to ask you to be the first
I'll take that
responder
one,
in this
Peter.
case.
Thanks for the question. One of the things we have that will help address that ahead of time is called the Area Maritime Security Committee. It's a committee that's put together essentially to get everybody to play together and to think about those very questions. And our response to it, we have a great standard called the National Incident Management System, Incident Command System. There are too many S's and systems in there. But it's an organization and a structure that allows multiple agencies to come together to resolve a problem like that. So we'd have a unified command in which each agency or each person that might be responsible for part of the response would be able to come together for a collective and collaborative response to anything like that. Now, is that going to take care of you specifically? I don't know, Mr. Joseph.
Is that set up right now in this area?
It is. Yeah, the Area Maritime Security Committee met this morning in the Port of Long Beach.
You know, the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles had not really communicated since 1928. They just started last year. It's my understanding that's the case, officially. Would they be part of this scenario? Would they be part of the...
Can I answer this?
Yeah. And that'll be
Mr. Joseph, I think I understand what you're trying to say, and I would beg to differ with you on security aspects, whether the Port of Los Angeles and the ports of Long Beach don't get along. It's great to see what you've seen out of them in the last year, but as far as the security of the port goes, those ports work very well together. They work very well with all the other partners, and they work very well with me. So I'm sorry that you've been disillusioned that way.
Okay, thank you for your question. I've got to move on to a question now to Kenneth Konigsmark. Ken, given your expertise in supply chain security and the attention Boeing pays to it, do you believe there is more that other companies, and I obviously don't want to ask you to cast too many judgments on other companies, but do you think there is more that private industry could do to bolster security efforts across the board?
Well, anybody on this panel and anybody who's in the security business would answer yes to that immediately, because there's always more you can do. As Mr. Jackson said, it's a function of resources and priorities. And so there's always more you can do. Boeing's a big company with lots of resources, but we're limited too. We're in a tough battle with Airbus on every airplane that gets sold. And so we are limited in how much we can spend on security. We want to, of course, do what we think is prudent and do it in a risk-based approach so that we're prioritizing where we can best do it. As far as other industry, I think the membership of the CTPAT program is an indication that industry takes it seriously. Last I heard, there were over 10,000 companies involved in the CTPAT program. So I think industry is stepping up, but sure, is there more that could be done? Of course. Will there be more that could be done 10 years from now? Of course. And that's always going to be the case.
Thank you. This question is for Todd Hoffman. And this is a tough one, but fortunately the Undersecretary left already, so you can answer me on his behalf. Will federal funding be adequate to employ the number of security personnel needed to operate the various security measures that are going to be implemented? Example, radiation portal, monitoring, etc.
Yes, and it already is.
Okay, I can check that one off. Well, since you were so quick at that question, I have another one for you. This may be tougher. What rules need to be changed to get more information on shipments?
Well, that's being worked right now at the headquarters level with COAC. It's Commercial Operations Advisory Committee is working closely with the department. Essentially, as the Deputy Secretary mentioned, in many respects, we're working with first-generation technology. As we get advanced information on every container that comes here, all 5 million containers. However, that advanced information is manifest information, which many say is limited, which in fact, in many respects, it is limited. So we're working right now, and essentially what happens is the information comes in, we get the manifest information, it is scored 24 hours prior to loading overseas, and we score the information. 80% of all containers that come here generally have the entry information attached to it, which is more in-depth information where we can hone in our targeting and narrow it down a little better. So the scores, that's why the scores are always changing while a vessel's at sea through our automated systems, and our risk is continually being assessed. What this would do is what they're working on at the headquarters level is they're working on what's called, you may have heard, 10+2. It's actually looking to get 10 more data elements that'll be with the manifest at the 24-hour rule. So those 10 additional data elements will have to come from the person in the supply chain via the Trade Act that has the most knowledge, which would probably be the importer, would provide those additional 10 data elements that are very closely aligned to the entry information. So we'd have that information in advance. And the +2 is 2 additional data elements that are being proposed that the carrier would provide, essentially vessel stow plans and container tracking information and stuff of that nature. So getting all that information in advance at the 24-hour rule would allow us to better align our resources. We'd know what our workload would be upon arrival. We wouldn't have the late scores when entry information is matched up later, since much of that is the same information. And then we could also, in many respects, do better forensics and restore trade lanes quicker in the event of a critical incident, if that was to occur, because we'd have better information, have more visibility into the supply chain.
Thank you. I've got a question over here on my right.
Thank you very much. On September...
Could I have your name and
My
your
name is
affiliation?
Bill Orton. I'm a PR guy working on behalf of the ILWU. On September 11th, and then also on September 12th, port terminals were evacuated due to bomb threats, first APL, and then on the 12th, Maersk, the largest shipping terminal in the world. On September 12th, there was a routine bridge work being done on the Vince Thomas Bridge on the westbound lane. The City of Los Angeles police were coordinating the evacuation at Ocean and Navy Way. The workers being evacuated were literally lined up bumper to bumper on Navy, and anyone taking a left on Ocean heading towards San Pedro to get out would have to merge from 2 lanes into 1 because of a routine lane closure. There were workers on the top painting the bridge. I asked my lawmaker to ask Caltrans, why didn't someone turn their head, see hundreds of cars bumper to bumper? Why was there no communication?
Mr.
Caltrans, well,
do you have a question for the panel?
Caltrans said they don't talk to each other. The LA Times says there's 9 evacuation plans for Terminal Island. In the event of a catastrophe, who coordinates the evacuation of tens of thousands of workers and all of the people on the island?
Okay. Captain Wiedenhoff?
Oh, I'll take that. The Area Maritime Security Committee has developed and will continue. You've identified one of the issues that we are concerned about, and that's the traffic flow when we go off. We had a tabletop exercise in the fall dealing exactly that would have dealt with a port evacuation. How do you get all these people out? And then how do you get them all back in? And where do you send them to? All those, you're raising some great issues, and there was a very clear real-world example of what happens. Better coordination is required, and that would be done under the Area Maritime Security Committee, under the captain of the port.
Is that to fold those 9 plans into one or into at least fewer than 9?
It would not be to fold them all into one, but it's to deconflict them more than anything else. Find out what are all the problems, where are the gaps in any of those plans, where are the things that overlap, and where are the things that conflict. So those are the issues that we need to deal with, and we're working with both ports and all the agencies that are involved in that to try to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a final question for John Schwartz. The TWIC program has shown that cooperation through different agencies, different levels of government, and the public and private sector is still problematic. What actions have been taken by the agency to improve working relationships with other agencies, and what challenges remain?
Well, I mentioned previously, I think, some of the boards that we've established and communication schemes. Certainly working with other agencies, the 2 principal ones that we've been working with on this program are the Coast Guard and also Customs and Border Patrol as we deal with their folks at headquarters on some of the issues that are specific to that. The program itself has a very wide outreach through our larger credentialing efforts, and we participate in a number of other interagency groups, both on the technical side. There's a thing called the Federal Interagency Advisory Board, which meets approximately 10 times a year to discuss various technical issues on the cooperation end. And then, of course, on making sure that our threat assessments are on target, there's the various committees that TSA participates in, but I really think that the cooperation has been very good, particularly between the Coast Guard and TSA, as this has been a joint rule signed by both the TSA administrator and the Commandant of the Coast Guard, and we actually have people that have been working physically with each other to get this rule out and to work now on the deployment and make sure that everything goes as well as we can and address issues with this very difficult employment.
Thank you. That's the last of the questions I'm going to pose this evening. What I'd like to do before I close the panel, however, is give each of the panelists an opportunity to make any comment they feel that a question that should have been asked that would have been a great question to answer. If you have any closing comments for the audience, starting with you, Todd.
Well, just my closing comments, and much of this was actually occurred in the video, so I don't want to dwell on it too much, is I just hope everyone in the room, and especially Mr. Joseph, I applaud a private citizen coming into one of these forums that is interested in what's going on, that you know the programs that are in place, the risk assessment that we conduct, knowing that we can't do 100%, knowing the layers of security that we have in place, knowing that we get advanced information on all 5 million containers that arrived here in 2006, knowing that we are screening them through automated targeting systems that are sophisticated and tied into various law enforcement and trade databases, knowing that since mid-December, every container that leaves here, whether it's via chassis or on-dock rail, is screened with a radiation portal monitor. Knowing we have 7 large-scale non-intrusive inspection X-ray type systems, 2 latest state-of-the-art systems, and knowing we have other programs in place that extend our zone of security out through CTPAT and the Container Security Initiative, where we're working with our foreign counterparts in 50 different countries. So all these layers working together and knowing what we do day in, day out to protect this country.
Thank you. Captain?
Well, I think when it was introduced early on, I think when Mary Ann introduced it, we talked about, well, you know, this is essentially a revisit of 5 years ago. And I would hope from what you've heard from the panelists tonight and from what you saw from that incredible video and what you heard from the Deputy Secretary, that you see that we have come a long way since 9/11. In the coordination, in the regulations that we're putting out, the the intelligence, the sharing of intelligence, and the improvement of intelligence, in the fact that we have a lot more presence out there and a lot more coordination, and that we have plans that are in place for response. That really still leaves an opportunity for everybody else to continue with their vigilance. As the Deputy Secretary and as Ethel spoke about there, we need the vigilance from everybody out there. We need to continue to improve our communications, and we need to keep going to the next generation of technologies and processes and protocols.
Thank you. John?
Well, I think there is a very difficult question that probably is of interest to many of you in this audience, so I'll ask it of myself, and I'll do the best I can to answer it. The difficult question is, why are we making workers at this point go out and pay for a card while we are not asking the facility and vessel operators to make their corresponding investment in card readers at this time? So that's a good question, but I think we have a good answer. First of all, this is a very unique program, a very large undertaking for the federal government. The benefits of having the card now and implementing it, we think, are very, very great. First of all, we will be able to have a common credential that can be recognized everywhere. So even though the card will not routinely be read as workers come to work, it'll be a card that can be recognized whether you're from New England or whether you're from Southern California. The individuals that have this card will have passed a reasonable threat assessment. The Coast Guard will be able to make spot checks to enhance the security of all the workers that are on the ports, and they will be able to check the biometrics on the card and verify that in fact that card belongs to the individual. And we will have accomplished a tremendous goal of getting all the workers in the maritime industry with one common credential. Very closely following on the heels of that accomplishment, while we're working on it, we will be working on the next phase, which is to get the contactless reader so that it functions in the maritime environment, in the cold, in the wind, in the rain, and greasy hands and whatnot. And we're working on that right now, and at that point then, we will be able to institute the reader requirement and fully complete the TWIC program. But it is a difficult program. We need to take it in stages, and this is a major, major security enhancement.
Thank you. Ethel?
9/11 changed everyone in this room, including me. The FBI changed our priorities from, I believe at that time it may have been drugs or gangs and white collar to counterterrorism, followed by counterintelligence and cyber. A lot of our efforts in the past 5 years have been devoted strictly to just combating acts of terrorism nationwide. We have increased, changed with the times actually, we've increased our task force environment by 3,000 task force officers. We've increased our agent population by about 2,000 since 9/11. And we have maritime liaison officers, and now 56 field officers, where before we only had probably about 10 nationwide. Port security, maritime security is of a high priority for us. It's one of the major things that we do, what I have responsibility for. And in addition, our infrastructure protection squad also has oversight, like I said earlier, of LAX airports, but we are also actively involved in other committees, security committees, which include aviation, which also include surface transportation, as well as maritime. And all these commingled together gives us a great body of information and intelligence that we share daily with each other. And with that information and with the citizens and the community who call in and provide us with additional information and intelligence and things that we need to help keep Los Angeles safe as well as the nation safe, we hope that we are doing the right things. We are making the right efforts. We're putting forth the resources where they need to be. We're establishing protocols and putting plans in place, so in the event something happens, as the man said earlier, the dirty bomb, we have all the heads of agencies working, talking, and communicating on a daily basis, and that is truly significant. There are other cities in the United States that may not have the same luxury as Los Angeles, but here specifically I know, for a fact that not only in Los Angeles County, but in the 7 counties, there's communication daily, routinely, on what we're going to do to prevent acts of terrorism, and for that, I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Thank you. And I'm going to let the private sector have the last word.
I think I'll just reiterate what I hope was woven in all the answers I gave, which is we all have a responsibility to help protect this country, and we've got to get beyond the mentality that it's the government's and military's job to do that. It's also industries, and it's also the longshoremen, and it's also everybody's in this room job to be the front line of defense. So we take it seriously, and everybody in this room should too.
Thank you. And now to make the closing remarks, I want to invite Dr. Moretti to take the microphone.
And all segments of the transportation chain marshal forces to hammer out a port security plan. More recently, a number of port security measures have been planned and implemented. These measures were outlined in this evening's video presentation, discussed as a part of our program, and defined in Dr. O'Brien's program insert. Combining the efforts of our panelists, their respective organizations, and all those involved in protecting our seaports, these port security measures are facilitating the safe and secure flow of cargo and act as effective deterrents to terrorist activities in seaports across our nation. Much has been said this evening about securing goods headed for our shores and entering U.S. seaports or guarding America's front door. Those of us who work on the waterfront see the land side or export sector of our nation's marine terminals, our port's back door, as presently being the soft underbelly of port security. A review of worker concerns include, but are not limited to, non-inspected empty containers and the integrity of seals on loaded containers, unidentified and undocumented individuals either crossing our borders, moving across our highways, or accessing our marine terminals, and inadequate funding for homeland security, infrastructure improvements, and its protection. We all know cargo volumes are up. Containers keep flooding our shores in record numbers. Pre-9/11, almost all empty containers entering our marine terminals were inspected by longshore marine clerks. Surprisingly, post-9/11, virtually no empty containers are inspected on dock. The catalyst for change was the introduction of new waterfront technology at marine terminal gates. Now only a small number of marine clerks interface with truckers. New technology can be a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it has increased port container throughput, while at the same time, it has compromised the level of security at port terminal gates. Dock workers are concerned about the contents or possible content of all containers, loaded or empty. We wonder what's inside those empty containers that haven't been inspected, or has seal tampering occurred on loaded containers? Is the container filled with goods for Walmart, or does it contain human cargo, with individuals hoping for a part of the American dream or possible terrorist devices? Trains moving across our nation's railways and servicing our harbors carrying empty containers or break bulk cargo are not checked for weapons of mass destruction. Our country's unguarded railway system poses a fragile level of security to those individuals who wish to carry out illicit activities. Dock workers are concerned that undocumented and unidentified individuals entering our marine terminals and crossing our nation's less than secure borders pose a threat to our ports and our country's security. Domestic truckers, vendors, and service people entering our port facilities pose yet another landside security threat. The success of our ports defending themselves from terrorist infiltration or attack will depend in large part on adequate levels of funding from Homeland Security. Aside from the monies given to fund port security testing programs and Operation Safe Commerce, the most recent Homeland Security dollar allotment for security upgrades at our twin ports totaled approximately $63 million. While greatly appreciated, these funds fall far short of monies the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach feel they need to implement their long and sought-after National Seaport Security Plan. The heart consists of a central command center speaking with one voice, linking goods movement providers and those responsible for protecting our ports in the event of terrorist attack. We are making progress. The center is presently being built in the Port of Long Beach. Port security is not just about equipment, new technology, or marine terminal improvements. Equally as important is port-related infrastructure that complements our modern state-of-the-art container terminals. These transportation arteries are an integral part of our port's overall security system, and while facilitating goods movement, they will also protect and strengthen the economic well-being of our nation. State and federal dollars are badly needed to tie our ports and their goods to every segment of our nation over a modern transportation network. Hope is on the horizon. Last November, California voters passed Proposition 1B, a $19.5 billion infrastructure improvements program. Trade corridor improvements that could benefit the ports total approximately $2 billion. That's the good news. The bad news is that startup time for the project could be as late as 2012 and be obsolete when completed. When in place, our greater transportation network must be protected. It is imperative that the U.S. Coast Guard, Customs and Border Protection, along with other law enforcement agencies, receive adequate funding from the Department of Homeland Security to secure and protect our ports, sea and land side sectors. These agencies are the foundation, the framework of our nation's security network. Their ability to carry out their work must never be compromised. We have learned this evening that guarding America's seaports is an enormous task. Although much has been done, the task is far from complete. It has been said that America is as vulnerable as our adversaries are determined. If this is true, then our nation's ultimate security goal must be weaken and ultimately eliminate the will and the determination of those who wish to do us harm. Then and only then will our seaports, our nation, and each and every American be safe and secure. In the final analysis, our nation's security has to become everyone's responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominic, very much for those wonderful words. Well, this is almost the end of tonight's presentation. What I need to do is I need to remind you to fill out those forms. It is very important that we have those. Also, I would like to get your attention to recognize some very important people that helped us to put this event together. We have Alex Travers sitting out there helping you all checking in. Her able assistant, Diane Delaterre, helped, and a number of volunteers. I see Allison here on this side. Tom O'Brien, who put the insert together and the beautiful white paper that you're going to read. Dave Kelly for the video. So please join me and give a round of applause to those helpers that we have tonight. I also need to mention one more time our sponsors. A big thank you goes, of course, to the Metrans Transportation Center, but also to the Port of Long Beach, to the Port of LA, to the ILWU, Local 13, 63, and 94 for their generous contribution, the Long Beach City Economic Development Center and Workforce Development Center, Price Transfer, thank you very much, the Sea Grant, and the Alameda Corridor Transportation Authority. A round of applause for those sponsors of us. So this concludes tonight's program. We are going to have a big event coming up next year in spring, and that is the 10th annual town hall meeting. We plan to have a very special event there, and we hope to see you all back. One more time, thank you to our panelists. I do have a little token of our appreciations for you, and I'm going to hand that to you in a moment. Thank you to you all, and I will see you back hopefully in 1 year from now. Thank you again. Good night.
Good luck. Keep up your good